Okay, let's talk about Robert Kiyosaki. You've probably heard of him, love him, hate him. You kind of can't ignore the guy. He is, without a doubt, one of the most influential and, yeah, definitely controversial names in finance. His book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it wasn't just a bestseller, it was a bombshell that totally rewired how millions of people look at their wallets. So today, we're going to crack open his whole philosophy, get right to the core ideas that built his empire, and, really change the game. All right, let's get into it.
So let's just kick things off with a question, and it's a big one that gets right to the heart of everything Kiyosaki talks about. What if that paycheck you rely on, the one that feels so safe and steady, is actually making you poorer? I know, it sounds crazy, right? But stick with me, because that one provocative idea, it's the foundation for everything we're about to unpack.
So where did this all come from? Well, Kiyosaki's whole worldview was shaped by these two major father figures in his life. He called them his two dads. First, there was his poor dad. That was his actual father. And this guy was brilliant. A PhD, a high-up government job, just a solid, smart guy who, despite all that, struggled with money his entire life. And then you had his rich dad. This was his best friend's father. He dropped out of school after the 8th grade. And yet, he ended up becoming one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. So you gotta ask, what was the difference? It boiled down to one thing. One dad worked for his money, while the other, well, he knew how to make his money work for him. And that one little difference? It's the key to this whole philosophy.
And that right there leads us straight to the main event, the core idea. It's the fundamental shift in thinking behind everything he teaches. And honestly, it's so simple, it's almost deceptive.
There it is. The poor and middle class work for money. The rich make money work for them. Kiyosaki's argument is that our entire school system from kindergarten on up is basically designed to churn out good employees. People who are really good at one thing, trading their time for a paycheck. But what it completely fails to teach us is financial literacy, how to actually speak the language of money. So the real point here isn't about getting a bigger paycheck. No, the real goal is to get to a point where you don't even need a paycheck because you've built systems, assets that generate income for you all on their own.
Okay, so you're probably thinking, how on earth do I actually do that? Well, it all starts with learning a new set of rules for the money game. And the good news is, it really just boils down to understanding two super important words: assets and liabilities.
All right, first up, an asset. And you can forget all those complicated, stuffy definitions you learned in school. In the Kiyosaki universe, it's dead simple. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. That's it, full stop. Like a rental property that pays you every month, or stocks that give you dividends. It's money flowing to you, even when you're sleeping.
And on the flip side, you have a liability. You guessed it, it's anything that takes money out of your pocket. Seems almost too simple, right? But trust me, really, truly understanding the difference between these two things in your own life, that's where most people go completely off the rails with their money.
And this right here, this is probably Kiyosaki's most famous and definitely his most controversial point. We've all been taught that our house is our biggest asset, right? Well, Kiyosaki comes along and says, nope, for most of you, your house is your biggest liability. And why? Well, just think about it. Every single month, it's just sucking money out of your pocket. Mortgage, taxes, insurance, repairs. It doesn't put a single penny in. Same thing with your car. See, it's not about what something is worth on paper, it's all about cash flow. Which way is the money moving? And this perfectly explains how you can have someone like a doctor or a lawyer making a ton of money who is still somehow completely broke. So if the goal isn't to just pile up a bunch of expensive stuff, liabilities, then what is it? It's freedom. Simple as that. For Kiyosaki, real wealth isn't about having $1 million in the bank. It's measured in time. The real question is, if you stopped working right now, today, how long could you survive? The end game, the whole point of this, is to get to a place where the cash flow from your assets pays for your entire lifestyle. That's the finish line. That is what financial freedom actually looks like.
This thinking also turns the whole idea of debt completely on its head. We're all raised to believe debt is the enemy, right? Avoid it at all costs. Kiyosaki says that's just poor dad thinking. He says there are two kinds of debt. You've got bad debt. That's when you use credit cards to buy liabilities, like a big screen TV or a vacation. It just makes you poor. But then there's good debt. This is when you use other people's money, like a bank's, to buy an asset that makes you money. The classic example is getting a mortgage for a rental property. Your tenant pays the mortgage for you, and you get to keep the profit. See? The rich don't run from debt. They use it as a powerful tool to get wealthy faster.
All right, so those are the big ideas. Now let's get into the playbook. How do you actually start to rewire your brain to think and act like the rich?
It really starts with the words you use. Think about it. When you see something you want, an opportunity, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's, I can't afford it. And just like that, the conversation is over. It's a statement, a dead end. Your brain just shuts down, and you've given yourself an excuse to do nothing.
But what if you change just one word? What if instead you ask, how can I afford it? See the difference? That's a question. It forces your brain to switch on, to start looking for solutions. It opens up all these possibilities. It's the difference between a mental roadblock and the starting line of a whole new way of thinking.
And really, this all gets wrapped up in the 6 main lessons from the book. Let's just run through them real quick. Number 1, the rich don't work for money, their assets work for them. 2, you have to learn financial literacy. It's the most important skill you can have. 3, mind your own business, which just means focus on building up that asset column. 4, get smart about taxes and corporations. 5, the rich literally invent money using their financial creativity. And number 6, don't just work to earn, work to learn.
Okay, now, we have to do a reality check here. We can't talk about Kiyosaki without talking about the controversies surrounding him. I mean, the guy is super polarizing, and you absolutely have to take his advice with a grain of salt.
So the critics will point out, and they're not wrong, that his advice can be way too simple, that his aggressive ideas about debt could get you into serious trouble, and that some of his own business dealings have been, let's just say, a little shady. All fair points. But here's the other side of the coin, something even his biggest critics usually admit. For millions of people, his message was a massive wake-up call. He's the guy who got them to even start thinking about financial education, about buying assets. So maybe the best way to look at Rich Dad Poor Dad isn't as a step-by-step instruction manual, but more like a giant mindset shift designed to make you see money in a whole new light.
So let's bring this all home and end with a question for you. Using that super simple definition we talked about, what is the single biggest liability in your life right now? What is the one thing that is consistently pulling the most money out of your pocket month after month? Seriously, just thinking about that and being totally honest with yourself, that could be the most important first step you take on a brand new financial path.